When Ilia Topuria's corner stopped his fight against Justin Gaethje at the White House, we all assumed it was a tough loss, a brutal beating. The kind of setback a great champion bounces back from in a few months. Then the medical reports started coming in. Orbital fractures in both eyes, a face described by doctors as being in a state that made surgery a real possibility. Tonight, we have confirmation. Ilia Topuria will not compete again in 2026. This is bigger than a loss. This is a serious injury that changes the entire trajectory of his career, the lightweight division, and the plans the UFC had for its biggest star. Let's break down everything we know. Let's start with the facts as they have been reported. Ilia Topuria suffered orbital fractures in both eyes during his fight against Justin Gaethje. An orbital fracture is a break in one of the bones that make up the eye socket, and having this injury in both eyes simultaneously is exceptionally rare and exceptionally serious. In the hours after the fight, Topuria was transported to the hospital. Photos and footage of his face afterward showed the kind of swelling and damage that immediately raised concerns beyond a typical post-fight beating. The remarkable detail in the reporting is that despite the severity of these fractures, Topuria reportedly will not need surgery. Given the state his face was in, that is being treated as a small mercy in an otherwise serious situation. But no surgery needed does not mean quick recovery. Orbital fractures, even ones that heal without surgical intervention, require significant time before a fighter can safely return to a sport where strikes to the face and eye area are a constant risk. This explains why his corner made the decision they did at the end of round 4. With both eyes affected by accumulating damage from Gaethje's jab, the kind of damage that contributes directly to orbital fractures, continuing into a championship round 5 carried real risk of more serious, possibly permanent harm. Looking back at the stoppage with this information, the corner's decision looks less like a quit and more like a responsible, possibly career-saving call. When the fight ended on the stool between rounds 4 and 5, the discourse online was split. Some fans criticized the stoppage as premature. Fighters have come back from worse, they argued, and a champion should be given every opportunity to fight until the final bell. Others defended the corner, pointing to the visible damage and trusting that experienced cornermen know when enough is enough. Now that we know the extent of the actual injury, bilateral orbital fractures, that debate should be settled. This was not a borderline call. This was a fighter sustaining a serious structural injury to his face. An injury serious enough to require hospital transport and oversight beyond standard post-fight medical evaluation. There is a long, unfortunate history in combat sports of fighters and corners pushing through serious facial trauma because of pride, championship stakes, or pressure from the moment. The fact that Topuria's team made the call they did, at the cost of public criticism in the immediate aftermath, looks, with this information, like exactly the right decision. This also reframes how we should think about Gaethje's performance. His jab was not just landing significant strikes. It was landing strikes precise and repeated enough to cause structural bone damage in the orbital region of both eyes. That is a testament to both the accuracy and the cumulative effect of his striking over 4 rounds. Let's talk about the timeline and what it means for Topuria's career. Reports indicate Topuria will not return to action in 2026. Depending on when exactly he is medically cleared, that could mean anywhere from 6 months to closer to a full year on the sidelines. Factoring in not just the bone healing time, but also the full training camp buildup required before stepping back into the octagon. For a fighter who built his entire brand around activity, dominance, and an undefeated record, this kind of extended layoff is uncharted territory. Topuria has never had to deal with a long-term injury layoff during his UFC run. His career, until now, had been defined by quick turnarounds and immediate dominance. This layoff also affects the larger landscape of the lightweight division. With Topuria sidelined, the title picture around Justin Gaethje will move forward without him. Names like Islam Makhachev, who has been vocal about wanting a title shot, will likely get opportunities that might have otherwise waited for a Topuria rematch. There is also a psychological dimension here that should not be ignored. recovering from a serious facial injury, one that came during the single most public and humiliating loss of his career, requires more than physical healing. Topuria will have months to process what happened at the White House, away from training camps and fight week distractions. How he uses that time mentally could shape how he performs when he eventually does return, with Topuria sidelined for an extended period. The lightweight division has to move forward without its former dominant champion in the immediate picture. Justin Gaethje is now the champion. His first title defense becomes one of the most important decisions the UFC has to make in the back half of 2026. Without Topuria as an option, the leading contender is almost certainly Islam Makhachev, the former pound-for-pound #1 who has stated publicly that he was bypassed for a Topuria fight previously. A Gaethje versus Makhachev fight presents one of the most fascinating stylistic puzzles in the sport. Gaethje's jab-heavy, more disciplined approach, the same approach that dismantled Topuria, would face an entirely different test against Makhachev's elite wrestling and grappling. Other contenders in the mix include Justin Gaethje, depending on his own career timeline, and the cluster of dangerous lightweights just below the very top of the rankings, some of whom impressed at UFC Freedom 250 itself, like Mauricio Ruffi. The division does not stop moving just because its most dominant recent champion is out. If anything, an open title picture creates more opportunities and more compelling matchups for fighters who have been waiting in the wings. Topuria's extended absence also reopens the conversation about the vacant UFC featherweight title, the belt he gave up to move to lightweight in the first place. With Topuria out for the rest of the year, there is no scenario where he could realistically drop back down to featherweight and compete for that title anytime soon. This means the UFC likely needs to address the featherweight vacancy independently of whatever Topuria's eventual plans are. Names like Diego Lopes, who impressed at UFC Freedom 250, and former champion Alexander Volkanovski remain in the conversation for that vacant belt. The UFC may finally be forced to book a clear path to crowning a new 145-pound champion, rather than waiting in hopes that Topuria returns to that division. This is actually a positive development for the featherweight division in some ways. Clarity, even when forced by circumstance, tends to be better for a weight class than prolonged uncertainty. It's worth taking a moment to look at history here, because Topuria is far from the first elite fighter to face a serious injury layoff after a career-altering loss. Fighters across combat sports have returned from broken orbital bones, broken jaws, and other serious facial trauma to compete again at a high level. The keys to those successful returns have generally been the same: full and complete healing time, smart matchmaking upon return that does not throw the fighter immediately back into the deep end, and a clear mental reset from whatever happened in the fight that caused the injury. Topuria has age on his side. At 29, even a year on the sidelines still leaves him in what should be the physical prime of his career. His skill set, elite striking, excellent composure, a granite chin that prior to this fight had never truly been tested, remains intact even while he heals. The bigger question is not whether he can physically come back. It is what kind of fighter and what kind of mentality he brings back with him. Does he return more cautious, having learned from the one fight where his aggression and confidence were finally punished? Or does he come back exactly the same, trusting the system that got him to 17-0 in the first place? As of now, public statements from Topuria's camp have been relatively measured, focused on the medical reality rather than bold predictions about an immediate return or rematch. This is, in many ways, the smart approach. After the very public guarantee of a first-round knockout before the Gaethje fight, a guarantee that did not come close to happening, a quieter, more measured public posture makes sense for Topuria's team right now. What comes next is largely out of his hands in the short term. Healing takes the time it takes. The UFC will continue building its lightweight division around Gaethje as champion in the interim. The featherweight picture will likely move forward independently. When Topuria eventually does return, likely sometime in 2027 based on current reporting, the entire buildup will be different than anything we have seen from him before. For the first time in his UFC career, he returns not as an unbeaten phenomenon, but as a former champion looking to prove the loss was an aberration rather than the start of a decline. That narrative, frankly, could make his eventual return even more compelling than anything that came before it. Here is the bottom line. Ilia Topuria suffered bilateral orbital fractures in his loss to Justin Gaethje at the White House. He will not compete again in 2026. What looked like a tough loss has revealed itself to be a serious medical situation, one that, in retrospect, makes his corner's decision to stop the fight look like exactly the right call. The lightweight division moves forward with Gaethje as champion and Islam Makhachev as the likely next challenger. The featherweight title picture, left vacant by Topuria's move up in weight, may finally get resolved independently. And Topuria himself faces the longest road of his career, both physically and mentally, before he can step back into the octagon. Tell me in the comments, when Topuria does return, who do you want to see him fight first? Subscribe and hit the bell. We will track every update on his recovery and his eventual return.